Hi guys, welcome to another series in our Java tutorial simplified course. My name is Lamoha Igoroje. So briefly, last in the introduction, we have talked about the Java language and why you want to code in Java and what we're going to be targeting with these tutorials and how you can access different materials and what you need to actually start in this course. In the introduction, I cannot overemphasize this point I made in the introductory video where I said that Java programming is an object oriented programming language. It is all about objects. If you can think about Java or think about what you want to achieve, as everything is an object, you need objects to do what you want. Statements in Java and how you write statements, what kind of statements you have and how they are represented. And then we're going to be talking about variables in Java programming as well and the variable types that you can have. So what are statements? Basically, when your computer wants to process your program or your set of instructions, because your code obviously are a set of instructions to perform a task. Yeah, that is the reason why you want to even program in the first place. You want to perform some task, you want to give the computer some tasks to do and give you some feedback or results. Now, one thing about performing the task is that in your code you need to write, you need to execute a set of statements, a set of instructions. So you say, I want to make a cup of tea. Statement 1, put water in the kettle. Yeah, it's an example of a statement. I am telling it, put water in the kettle. Next thing, turn the kettle on. Yeah, water is an object. um you can think of water as an object, you can think of the kettle as an object, and I'm putting one object in one and I'm doing something. Yeah, so I'm going to create a method for boiling water, for example, to make my tea. Yeah, so basically you're given a set of statements. All those statements you make in Java, each statement will be processed sequentially, one after. What it means by sequential processing is one after another. Process this statement first. So from the main, for example, where your program starts running, yeah, like we said, in the main is where it fires up your the computer to run or to do what you're asking it to do. In the main, you write the first statement, which the statement could be looking into another object, and that object, when you go into that object, it has a statement to do something first before doing something else. So it's all about finishing one statement before the next one starts. Yeah, so there's always that sequential processing. A simple statement, for example, is a single activity. Put water in the kettle. That is a statement. It is simple and as easy as put water in the kettle. Yeah, so like in our example, the practical example we saw in the introductory video, where an example of a simple statement now saying I want to print hi. So simple statements are terminated by a semicolon. Now this is a simple statement. Very long statement. You could spread it across several lines to make it easy for people to read your code. As long as you've not terminated the statement by the semicolon, in Java, it's going to assume, like, if you write something on one line, write continue and keep writing until you terminate it with a semicolon. It's going to see it as one statement. So if there's an error, if it's something that you cannot, maybe there's some kind of syntax in something you're doing in that statement because it's so long, it will tell you in your IDE. If you're using a good IDE, you will know, and your program would not be able to run. So basically, we have the simple statements like I've said, a single activity and is terminated by a semicolon. Just have that in mind. Remember, all simple statements terminate with semicolon. Now we have what we call compound statements. A compound statement is just a combination. I'm going to show us a practical in our code. We'll look at an example. Now, a compound statement groups a compound statement is like a sequence of statements. So it's like a set of instructions. So you have one instruction, you have another, you have another. Put water in the kettle, press on. When the water is boiled, put it in the cup and put my tea bag. Those are all different statements, and I could decide to put them in one pack, one compound statement, like make creative. So in like it's like putting them all in one container or one object in one box. So a compound statement just contains several sequence of statements, like one after the other. So compound statements most times, oftentimes starts with a curly braces opening and it ends with the curly brace close. Yeah. So we would see again examples of compound statements must have this curly braces opening and closing. Yeah. A compound statement contains sequences of simple statements. So for example, system.out, system.out, which is an object for printing things out, has methods called print line that we can use, which can print to a line. It will print one thing on a new line. One statement may contain one simple statement. It may contain more statements. So if I give it this again, so print, say I want to print a number, or let's just say print by. So I've got two statements. So the computer in my programming code, because it will always start from, most of your compound statements will start running sequentially. That's one after the other, all your simple statements within it. So in Java, my code will run this first, which will print hi, and then go to the next line, print a new line, and then I'm printing by in the second line. So I'm going to show you an example of running this. So let's run this and you'll see. So you can see in the console, hi and bye have been printed. So because you wrote two simple statements in that compound statement. Yeah. So like I said, the main method, the main object that we saw contained the main method, which fires up everything, starts the instructions, and it came as a compound statement because it even started with this and it ends with this. So every method objects you create must variables. What are variables? If you by now have, as like I said, even if you want to start programming in Java, you should already have an idea of, you should have basic computer knowledge and strength of, or rather not basic, you should have good experience of computers, a good understanding of computers, and you should have come across what variables are. Variables are a kind of object in Java. So write Java program codes. Yeah. So computer programs normally, as we know, they store temporary values in their memory. You give it a value, it stores values temporarily in their memory. Yeah. So we need a picture. Picture this. Think of the computer memory as a sticky box. Yeah. Initially, the box is totally empty. Now we place a value in the box. Yeah, the box is no longer empty. Yeah, it's a sticky box, so we place a value in the box. It's no longer empty. It's the sticky part. What do we mean by it's a sticky box? The sticky part just means that we cannot take the value out of the box again. Yeah, we can either just replace it. So the once we put something in to the computer memory, which is a sticky box, it will never be empty. The only thing is it can keep replacing that value. So that value can just keep changing. An example, you can copy your value stored in the box as much as we want to and as many times as you want to. You can change the value. Yeah. And once you change the value, the way we change the value is by putting in a new value or referring to that sticky box. It's a variable. Yeah, just get this right. So there's the sticky box that is like representing the computer memory sticky box. You have That's what we call refer to as variables in Java. Now you can give that variable, or you must most times give the variable a value. So you assign a value, and once you do that, there's no going back. Yeah? You can now copy that value or that variable and use it as many you copy that value by calling the variable as many times as you want to. Once you replace the value in that box, once you replace it, the old value goes. Yeah? And the new one sticks in. Yeah? Then you can now take copies of the new value. Picture it. I keep saying this thing. Java programming is just all about objects. Now, I have a variable. I've defined a variable called cup, meaning I am saying I have a box called cup. Yeah, it's a box. Imagine a cup being covered, like a covered cup. I'm declaring that I have that variable called cup to my system. I'm telling my system. So in the memory of this system, I'm saying this is what I want you to create first, this box for me. Now I want you to put this value inside this box, water. So I assign into the variable the value water. The variable cup, I assign water into it initially. I think I'll just stick to the sticky box, and you can change it, the value inside. Yeah, you can copy the value, and then you can make use once you copy a new value into the box, or rather once you change the value in the box, you can now start using copying the new and using the new value. Yeah, so like I said, these computer memories or boxes are called the variables, and most times you need to identify, like I gave you the example just now. I said you have a variable or you have a box called cup. So I've said a variable cup, and I want to put some value into that cup, inside that cup, something in the cup, an object in the cup. Yeah. Now, that name I've given, cup, what does it tell you? It identifies that particular variable. So every variable must have an identifier. And in Java, identifiers must start with a letter. You can follow the letters with numbers. You can't start an identifier as a number. It wouldn't let you in Java. That's one thing you need to remember. By convention, Java variable name starts with lowercase. It's just like good practice, or to always start your variable names with lowercase, because it's just a kind of identifier. It's not really something you want to be focusing on, or it's just easier, and it's like a practice. It's a convention to do that in Java. If there is a sequence of words, yeah, say an identifier is big cup. Those are two different words, but I want to put them together as one word. So you capitalize each one. That is what you do in Java. So if there are a sequence of words, then you start each of those words except the first. You capitalize each word, big cup, and you join them. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So one thing you need to do when you're choosing, when you create your own objects, meaning if you are using that object, like, because if to use an object in Java language, you always have to um declare them. That's why we say declare your variables. You start from declaring variables and assigning values to it, and then from there it's like saying you start with putting the water in the cup. Yeah, so you've given the variable cup as, say, string cup or object cup or whatever, because it's an object. But in simple terms, you create a small simple box. Say I create a box object string words to contain words. I'll use this example, which is simple, and I give it the first word as Lami. Yeah, and then I want to take that and create my own object. I would use it in creating the different objects. We'll see much later in this course how you can create your own objects actually. So what is a literal? Literal. Literals are actual values written in the text of the program. So you can have different types as well, or rather different types of variables that you have. That's different types of boxes, like I've been using the box illustration, can have different forms of literals. For example, if it's a string box, a string type kind of box, that's a box that can contain only strings. The literal must be inside double quotations in Java. So for example, you have the string saying hello world. So basically this is the literal, and then it has to come in the string literal, which is a double quotation mark. An int literal is a whole number. A double literal, so it's like saying literally what this box can take is this kind of format. Yeah, so it's saying strings must be in this kind of format. Just remember, strings must be in this kind of format, like you're writing the string in quotes. You're writing integers must be whole numbers, and decimal doubles must be decimal points. So basically it's like trying to tell you what the actual value that can be written in that or stored in that box should look like or be. So variable definitions, like I said, we have different types of, so right now we've said you have different boxes, these are your variables, and they all have different things, types of things they can carry. Like I said, a cup can contain water, but a basket, you can't put water in the basket, it's going to mess things up. So just picture that water cannot be put. So basket has certain things it can contain, types of objects it can contain as well, and cup has its own because of their types, because of the different types of materials that was used to make them. Yeah, then each variable, like each box, has a type. So there are some boxes. When we said variables are like boxes, picture them as the boxes housing certain values or certain objects you need. Values can be referred to as objects. Boxes are objects, the values are objects. So variables and values are objects. Everything is an object. Now, but in going with the Java terms, if you now have a variable, that's a box, and you want to give it a value, you need to understand what kind of values can this box contain. You cannot, let's use practical, let's think about this. Picture this. You have a variable cup and then you have a variable basket. You definitely don't want to be putting a value water inside the variable basket. You want to put water in the right thing that can hold it, like the right box that can hold water. So basically, it matters that you understand what the type of the variable is and you declare what the type of the variable is. So there are different types of information that the computer program can store in all the boxes. You can have some storing words. You can have some boxes that store words. You can have some boxes that store numbers. And you can have some boxes that, so imagine a big box that you put another small box into. So the small box, so imagine I have a small tiny cup of water with a cover. I cover that and then I put it into a box. Yeah? I have a small box and I put this into it. And then I have a bigger box that I take that big box containing the water object and I put that again into the bigger box. So basically, you can have a type called object. So it's a box that would contain only objects. So when you create such boxes, it only would accept you to put objects in it. If you create a box containing numbers, it would only accept numbers in it. If you create an object containing words, it will only accept words in it. Words have a type in Java called string. Remember this? Those are things you need to remember. We're going to be seeing that in practice. It has a type called string, and numbers can either be whole numbers. Whole numbers are referred to as integers, and it's a type int. Real numbers, that's with decimal point, we refer to them as double. So for example, if you have a whole number like number 2 and you want to put that in a box that is meant to house doubles, it's going to complain and tell you you're putting this in the wrong box. And we're going to see an example of such very soon. Different type. So like I said, a string type box can only store text. We must tell the computer about every box we are going to use before we use it. This is a variable definition and it must include both the type and the name. So you have to start by defining your variable and it will include what the type is and what the name is. So we're going to see an example of that when we start the practice of this. Now, variable definitions as well. When you're defining a variable, you terminate it. They're like statements. All the definitions, like saying string cup or string, I'm creating a string type of cup. Yeah. And it's a statement. It's telling the computer to do something. It's telling the computer this is the box I want to create, and this is the type of box I want to create. This is the name I'm giving that box. Yeah. So you're defining it. It's a statement. It needs to be terminated by a semicolon. Like I said, every statement is terminated by a semicolon in Java. And then now you can do variable definitions anywhere in your code. Inside a compound statement, you can have it. You can have it after one compound statement, before the next compound statement, whatever the case may be. Now, some examples of variable definitions. Some examples of variable definitions that we have. Some examples are, for example, you literals. So you give first name, you're just giving an identifier. This is the identifier first name. And you can separate it with a comma. And if you say last name, so it's going to create one first name, a variable, and it's going to create a second one, last name, and we terminate this by a semicolon. Yeah, so I've defined a variable. I haven't just get this. I'm creating the box first name. I'm creating another box last name to contain just strings. Yeah, I haven't given it any value yet. It's an empty box. So I've just defined, this is what we call variable definition. I have just defined that variable. Now we have integers. So if you want to do int, you give it an identifier I, J, K. You separate them by commas if you're creating multiple. If it was just one, for example, if it was just one integer we wanted to create, one box that can contain, we'll just create this box and identify it by I. We terminate it by a semicolon, and it's going to create a box that can only contain integer type values. Yeah, and the same thing when you're declaring or defining, sorry, your, yeah, you can call it declare your variables. That's one thing you want to remember. Now, initialization, after you've defined variable, the next thing, you need to initialize that variable. You need to assign a value to it, the first value, because that was what would help in starting up your program. If it's empty, then nothing is going to happen. Like, it's just empty. It's doing, if you tell it to do something, it's not going to be able to do anything because it's empty. The box is empty. You can't, there's nothing in the box I can use to do what I want to do. So basically, you need to first give it the initial value. So you can choose to give a box an initial value when you define it immediately, or like you can give it later the value. You can do it immediately, or you can initialize the value, the first value, the first initial value after within the code. If you do not initialize it, Java will just start off with 0 for numerical values, or as an empty text it will just say it as empty. Or if it's like a number, integer or double, it will just come out as the 0 value. Yeah, other programming languages may create their own variable containing junk, whatever. So basically, but it is safer. One practice I would say, it's safer to initialize your variables when they are created, to prevent having an empty or junk value or something being put into it. Most times when you want to initialize your variables, you use an equal to sign in the variable initialization. Yeah. So basically, or rather in your variable definition, so basically when we were defining this, say for example, you defining a variable, you wanted to define a variable called int I, that's you're creating a box I, and you're saying it can only contain integer types. Yeah. Now it is good practice to just assign it immediately the initial value it should have. So basically, you use an equal to sign to assign in Java. So I'm saying this will assign it as 0. And that's it. And you terminate each after your initialization with a semicolon. So they're what we call operations in Java. So basically, each type has a set of operations that work with that type. Yeah. So for example, numbers, which commas, when I said number types can be integer or doubles. Integers are whole numbers, doubles are decimal numbers, and you can use different kind of operations on them. You can use minus, plus, subtract, because they are numbers, they are numbers. So you can do a lot of calculations in your codes by using these operations on them. Now strings, on the other hand, can be joined with an operation called concatenation, and we'll see an example of that very soon. So basically, I've said values are as a result of calculations. So a copy of a value stored in a variable box, the results of an arithmetic. So this is just telling us basically that your values can be results of doing something. It could be that you copied something, a value that was in a box. It could mean that you just given a new value into the box. It could be that you did some kind of calculation, and then the answer, the sum of two numbers, for example, you put that in the box, in the sticky box. So whatever was in the sticky box left. So you've given the new the box the new result. Yeah, it could be that the values are just literals like we've seen. You can pass a value into methods. A lot of methods actually, you need to um, give it some kind of objects. Sometimes you may not necessarily need to give a method an object. You may just need to reference that object, yeah, and it will perform whatever statements or instructions are in that object, yeah. It would start looking at it one after the other. But you can give values into methods. So for example, you can just give a string straight into a method of print line, and it's going to print that value for us, because the method already knows that it can receive either different types of a method object, or a print line method object would always can receive different formats of literals, string, integer, different types rather of, yeah. So basically, that's about values. And like I said, when you put an equal to sign, yeah, you're changing whatever the value is in the box. So say I defined a variable called greeting, and it has this string type. So I created this box called greeting, and I said it's going to contain strings. Now I want to give this my greeting. This is just an identifier, remember, greeting. Now I want to give that greeting box some string. So I'm going to put the equal to sign. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's equal to, but what it means is I'm putting what is here into this. So I'm copying what is on my left hand side, actually, or you say copy what is on the right hand side of it into the greeting box. Yeah, just get it right. It doesn't mean equal to. It kind of, well, you some people call to sign. Yeah, you're changing whatever the value is in the box. So say I defined a variable called greeting, and it has this string type. So I created this box called greeting, and I said it's going to contain strings. Now I want to give this my greeting. This is just an identifier, remember, greeting. Now I want to give that greeting box some string. So I'm going to put the equal to sign. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's equal to, but what it means is I'm putting what is here into this. So what we're going to be doing is that we will define some variable of a radius, and we'll try to do an operation arithmetic to find the area, and we will copy the value stored in the radius to do that calculation for us. Yeah. And we're going to be using multiply by a literal, using the we're going to be using the times operator, that's multiply sign, produce an arithmetic and store the result in a variable. So let's do that. So most times every method you are using, or every object method, let's just, like I keep saying, think of it as objects. So it's always good practice for us to call them. So this is a main method. It's known as the main object to start this program. And it contains a compound statement which houses all my simple statements put in. Yeah. Now for variable declaration, the example like I've spoken about and I've showed us. So we'll do a little example. So we want to say we want to calculate the area of a circle. So basically, and I need to make use of a radius because the area of a circle is pi radius squared. So the first thing I want to do is that I want to create a box to define the box called radius, which I would give whatever value the radius is going to be to use to calculate the area of the circle. So now I'm creating a box called radius. This is a name, this is an identifier. So you start with giving the identifier, but then what is the type? Because you need to declare what type of box is this? What does it contain? So we want the radius to be whole numbers. It could be doubles. So if it's whole numbers, we said numbers have a type of integer or double. So because it's a whole number, it's integer. So we'll declare it in Java. So we've defined it, rather, or declare whatever the word you want. We've defined this radius. It's complaining because we haven't terminated with a semicolon. So I have defined this radius, but I haven't given it any value yet. So it's an empty box. So automatically Java is going to assume this is 0. It contains 0 if you do not assign any value. So it's always good practice to assign a value because as you're defining it. So I've defined it, but I've not assigned any value to it yet. So in order to make sure it works and it does what it's meant to do, I need to assign it as once a value. If not, it's going to be using 0 and the result I'm going to be getting is 0. So I'm going to initialize that. You could try that on your own and you will see that it will give you 0 if you do not initialize it. So I'm going to give it an initial value and I want my radius to be 2. So I've given it the value 2 as the whole number. Now I need to use this radius to calculate the area of the circle. So area of circle. So we say it start it's always good practice to start your identifier names with small letters, and if they have any other if like it's a compound word, you capitalize the rest words, the first letters. So basically what it's complaining is I need to also tell it what type. So what type, how do I want my result? Do I want my result to come out as decimal numbers? Do I want it to come out as whole number? Yeah. So I'm going to give it to come out as decimals because your area of your circle can be in decimal because you have what you call you have the pi. Pi is usually 3.142. So I mean I'm defining the area of the circle. I gave it this is the identifier. I've defined it to contain or rather the type. I've defined what the type of that box is. It's a double. It contains integer numbers. And so this is the box area of the circle. And what do I want to store in that box? I want to be able to calculate the area of the circle by copying this radius, using this radius, and then store whatever value. So I'm going to give it, so basically I'm saying do this calculation for me times, I need to make use of, I want to copy the value 2 in my radius box because I want to make use of it twice. So I will just refer to it as radius and then times radius. And then I terminate that statement, that instruction, with a semicolon. Yeah. Now you see that this is no more in yellow. If you're using an IDE to tell you when you've used an object or not, like when you've used the variable. So these are variables, the area of the circle and the radius. Now I have said assign or copy 2 into this box radius. Now I have said in here, take the value that you copied or the value in the radius box, use it, multiply by another second radius, as in copy of the radius value, and then multiply it by this 3.142, which is pi. That's the formula for the area of the circle. And I'm saying put it in this box called the area of the circle. Next thing, to check to see what the result is, I'm going to use the system object, the system.out object, which is an omnipresent object that you can use in any class you create in your Java. I'm going to use system.out object, and I'm going to print the area to line. So I'm going to print line. So if you're using an IDE, you'll see suggestions as you're going along of the different types of methods in that. Once you want to call, so when you want to call a method, so you're using the system.out object, which is an object that exists in Java that can be used anywhere. You want to call a method, you have to use the dot. So whenever you want to call a method, you say dot this. So the object dot that, you call the method. So system.out contains several little objects or methods or method objects, whatever you want to call. They contain different methods. So I'm using the print line, and basically I can see all, once I type that, it shows me all the different options. I can print the things. I can put literal, like a literal of a boolean literal, a character, a double, a float, integer. I can print all sorts of things. I can put a string literal in and it would print it immediately, like we saw in the previous examples here, where we were just putting in the string literal straight into the system to print something. But here, because it's a calculation, it's a double, we want to print line and we want to give it a double. So it's expecting us to give the double. An IDE will also show you already all the different doubles or values you have. Yeah, so numbers you have. So we're going to pick area of the circle, which is the one we want to print, and then that line is terminated. If, for example, I want us to try this again, imagine us picking the radius and putting the radius in here. It's going to work too, because print line can take integer. It can take, this print line method can take so many forms. There's so many forms of the print line, where you can print a string literal, integer literal, so whatever it is. So but we're interested in printing the area of the circle, and then we're going to run this now, and that's it. So if you see, because I left this instruction hi and bye, so basically my Java codes would print out, it's because I said every the main object will start working in sequence. It will do statement 1 before going to statement 2. It goes, whatever statement, it goes to the statement. So if statement 2, say for example statement 1 was saying jump to statement 3, it would go straight to statement 3, but that wasn't the case. I did statement 2, fine, execute statement 3 and 4, 5, as the case may be. So it printed this statement, and because this was just a case of assigning 2, creating a box radius and assigning 2 into the box, nothing was shown or printed to the console. And the same for this, because I was doing an operation on to find the area of the circle using the radius and using the multiply literal or multiply function or arithmetic operator rather on this to calculate the area of the circle. And then I said whatever the results I get as the area of the circle, put it in that box area of circle. And then now I'm printing the area of circle, which it has printed it out for me here. So that is just all about variables, the types, and thank you for listening. This has been the talk about variables, the types, and all that we have. Thank you.